Hey, how's it going? I did not have anything to do. Obviously, I just did my hair and my makeup. It's all wet. Um, but I was just trying to think of something to talk with you guys about. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit out. I'll crunch down a little bit. I'll fix it. Nope, I won't fix it. I don't know how. I just want to get on and talk with you guys today. I wanted to talk about something that sucks. Really does suck. I'm going to talk to you about losing a parent when you're a teenager. Yeah, kind of depressing. By kind of, I mean a lot. So I guess I'll start this off with, I lost my dad when I was fresh out of high school. It was the summer right after, but he had been sick for a while. My junior year of high school, I found out that my dad had brain cancer, glioblastoma. I believe it was stage 4. Honestly, a lot of that is such a blur. I feel like I just blocked a lot of it out because it's one of those things, if I think about it too much, I'll just be sad all the time, and I don't want to be sad. I found out my junior year, I was homesick, and my dad had a doctor's appointment for something he'd been dealing with for a while. My parents were divorced, so my dad would drive me to school every day, and my school was 45 minutes away from my dad's house because my mom lived where my school was, and I was with her most of the week. But my dad would drive me on Fridays to school, the 45 minutes, and it was our bonding time. Before and after school, that was our alone time that we got to hang out and talk and just, catch up with each other. And we noticed that he had just started feeling really sick, which is not unusual because he had hiatal hernia and dealt with a lot of stomach issues through most of his life, which me and my brother also deal with a lot. So he would take the anti-nausea medicine, if he felt like he always felt like he was smelling something weird. And I was like, I don't smell anything, Dad. I don't know what you're smelling. I don't know what that could be, And, well, he went to the hospital and they did I don't even know, a whole bunch of tests. And they did a scan and they found something, and basically he did not come back from his doctor's appointment that day. Eventually he came back home, but that day he did not come back. Leanne came home and basically told me that they made him stay in the emergency room, and they were going to book him in the hospital, and he needed surgery right now, which was terrifying. To me, it was scary. So we had to wait for my stepsister and my half-brother to get home from school that day. And basically we all just went up to the hospital with him, and basically those times that he was smelling something and feeling sick was mini seizures when he was driving, which is terrifying because if they had been worse, who knows what had happened, But anyway, so he got the scan and it came back with glioblastoma, and he had several, I believe he had one large tumor, or whatever you want to call it. I'm sorry. Again, a lot of it I just tuned out. But I'm pretty sure he had a large one, and several small ones branching out. And so they wanted to do surgery to take it out. And of course, at this point in time, I'm a teenager, and it's just scaring me. And my dad was my best friend, and guess I'm going to cry today. He was my best friend, but at the same time, I'm in high school, and I don't grasp it fully. I don't want to grasp it, basically. I don't want to think about what this could mean. And I'm just so worried about this prom dress that I had just gotten, and it was getting tailored. My dad actually picked it out for me. It was a really pretty pink prom dress, and that he picked out and paid for, and it was awesome. And I was so worried about going to pick that up, and I don't know why. I think it was just something to cling on to, other than thinking about what was happening. And I stayed with him for a week in the hospital. I was the one that stayed in the hospital room with him 24/7 for a solid week until I had to go back to my mom's. And everybody ran around getting the laundry and things like that, and I just didn't want to leave. Honestly, I didn't want to leave him, and I don't know, it was crazy. It was a blur. And then I remember he went in for his surgery, and like the whole side of his head was shaved, and it had a big like just a big old scar, not a scar because it wasn't a scar yet, but a big old incision with like the stitches. And yeah, and I remember him getting out of surgery, and we were all relieved, and basically it was just the start of it. But you know, we were just happy to have that done. And I remember he had to be there for a little bit, obviously, and then he went home, and I went home, and yeah, it was a lot, to be honest. And I'm trying to think what even to tell you next. I remember going to school, and I remember everybody asking me where I'd been, and I remember I was doing a project with several kids in my class that was like a 4-person project, and I remember telling them, you know, I'm sorry I didn't get anything done. I was having a crisis. I was doing some stuff, you know, and the teacher, I remember telling the teacher that, and yeah, so that was fun. I just remember that's how everybody knew. And of course, after everybody knows, everybody tiptoes around you the whole time, which honestly at that point I didn't even care about, because I didn't want to talk to anybody except for my good friends. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody to talk to me about it. I didn't want to do anything. I mean, school was always okay to me. I liked going just to get out of my family drama, because my parents were divorced and they did not get along at all. My stepmom, my dad, and my mom did not. It was always a custody battle. It was always something, in other words. They were always fighting, and so school was kind of like my reprieve. I wasn't necessarily good at school, but, you know. So I remember that, and I'm trying to remember how this all went, because I just really remember bits and pieces. And I remember her prom coming up, and I remember going to get the prom dress with my mother, picking it up, because my dad and Leanne weren't picking it up. Like, nobody had the time. And I remember just thinking, okay, well, I'll just go with my mom, that they don't have to worry about it. It's a freaking prom dress, who cares, you know, kind of thing. I'll just go do it with my mom. Well, because my mom and dad and stepmom hate each other, they saw that as like oh, really now? And they got really mad. I remember that. Really mad. And then so I got mad, because basically everyone had an outlet to like let all this anger out, this angry feelings. And I just remember growing up, like, this is going to sound dumb, but I was a lot of that outlet. Usually something to do with my mom or me was the anger outlet for everybody. And so I remember getting a lot of that when I was younger. But again, I got that. That was awesome. I got yelled at and screamed at for basically taking that away from them, which I didn't realize I was doing. I thought I was helping, but that's fine. And then I remember that night I had my first, like, official just breakdown. Like, I just screamed and cried to my mom, and I took it out on her. Sorry, I'm gonna cry, apparently. I remember taking it out on her, and she knew it wasn't about her. And I think that's the loudest I've ever screamed. I just was screaming all these things, and not things I can obviously say, but I was just basically F the world kind of thing, and I was just screaming and crying, and it was a lot. And it wasn't just because of all that, it was because of everything, you know. And I remember that, and then, you know, things passed and all that, and I went to prom, and my dad walked me down the red carpet, because I did not have a date, obviously, but my dad walked me down the red carpet, and that is one of the most special memories I have of that time period, you know, in those dark times, because it didn't get better from there. I'll tell you that right now, because if you know anything about glioblastoma, it changes the person's personality a lot, because of the pressure, and it just warps things, and all the medicines, and they don't act. It's kind of like dementia, where they get aggressive sometimes, or frustrated, which is totally understandable, because who wouldn't, really, you know? And then the people around them, everybody gets angry, and because there's nothing you can do, pretty much, is what it is. And I remember my mom and me talking about going up to see him, because nobody could drive me up there, and I didn't have a license at that point, because I'm a horrible driver. I don't know what it is about driving, I'm just not good at it. And that was something my dad always did, and so no one was willing to do that. I mean, a couple of my dad's side's family members would pick me up and drop me off. That was a couple of times for, like, my lessons, because I used to take singing lessons. And I think my grandma tried to drive me up there a couple times, but she really can't see. Her eyes are really bad. But getting up there to my dad was very hard, and I know that was a thing that I also got in trouble for. It was a very hard time, because everybody just needed something to be angry at, and I was angry too, but I think I remember going up there, and I had gotten a good score on my math test. I'd finally gotten up there to go see my dad, and it'd been a while. And of course, I didn't want it to be that way, obviously, but I did not have a choice, because I was a minor, and I had to do what my parental told me to do. So, and I think a lot of it too is the situation just wasn't good. It just wasn't good, like I've said. But I remember I got a good score on my math test, which was unusual for me, because I'm horrible at math. I had an IEP for math, actually, which is when you're in the special ed math class. It was just one of the subjects that I really struggled with. It took me a lot to understand the concept, but once I did, it was fine. But anyway, I got a good score, and I remember going, and my dad was sitting on the porch, and my stepmom was next to him, and I said, "Oh, you know, Dad, I got a good score on my math test." And my stepmom just piped in and said, "Oh, for once, you got a good score, that's surprising." And I remember at this age, I had taken a lot up until then. That did not go over very well with me, because at that point, I'm a senior, and I'm starting to kind of grow into my own. I was always really shy, but I was starting to just not deal very well, and I distinctly remember getting in a screaming match about it. Saying, like, I looked at her and I said, "Really? That's what you're gonna say to me right now? Cool. Okay." And I remember just getting really, like, an attitude. And she got an attitude, and I don't even remember what else happened that day, honestly. I just remember that being shit. And I think I looked at my grandma and said, "Okay, well, if that's how it's gonna be, then maybe I should leave," because she was mad. Basically, my stepmom was mad that I hadn't been around very often. And so, yeah, that's where that came from, which obviously I wish I had been around more often, but I didn't have necessarily a choice, so it was hard for me to understand. But, yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm sorry, I'm really trying to think what else, because it's hard to remember everything. I think somewhere in there I know. I got a boyfriend somewhere in there, and I got a boyfriend a while back, like my junior year. So right after my dad got sick, like that summer, my junior summer, into senior year. I got a boyfriend in there, so he was who is now my husband, by the way. He was my big support system because I felt like everybody was just against me the whole time. Everything I did was absolute trash, apparently. All my decisions. So but he was my big support system, and his family was a big support system for me because my family was always just fighting with each other. Being around my dad was hard at that point because he had regressed so much because they start losing the ability to walk and do things for themselves. So basically they're bedridden, and eventually he couldn't talk and he couldn't get up out of bed, he couldn't walk anywhere, he couldn't do anything. So it was basically a hospice care situation where we had to feed him and brush his teeth and trim his mustache and do all the things that they can't do for themselves. And it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. It was hard to be around that because my dad was a strong man who was very independent, was outdoorsy, just doing things all the time. So me and my half brother and my stepsister were kind of banded together, and we would do things like go out to eat and things like that, because eventually after my senior year of high school, I moved in for the summer. I guess I moved in at the middle of my senior year or so, because I got mono. I got mono and I was very sick, and my mom basically called me a liar, and so that was fun, and it got kind of, I don't want to say violent, but yeah, I left. I basically said, I'm not dealing with this, and I'm leaving, and my stepmom came and got me, and I moved in with them. I know, it's very confusing. 1 minute I'm fighting with my stepmom, 1 minute I'm fighting with my mom. Yeah, that was pretty much my whole life growing up. Very confusing. And so I moved in with them, and I would drive my brother to school, to high school. To middle school. Whatever school he was in. He was in middle school, I think. And I would drive him to middle school, and then I would make the 45-minute drive to school. So I was always late, but the school gave me first period free so that I could do that, because it wasn't free, I guess. It was a Algebra 2 or something I didn't need to graduate because I had all my credits. So they just let me skip that class, which was super awesome. I'll tell you that right now, because to take my brother to school on time, it just made me late because of the distance. And so I took him to school, and then I took myself to school, and then after school, I would go hang out with my boyfriend for a little bit, and then I would make the drive home because my brother got a ride from my stepsister, or Leanne at that point, because I wasn't going to make it to go get him from my school, obviously. I would have had to leave early. So I'd hang out with my boyfriend for a little bit and come back home, and then my stepmom, for her job, she traveled a lot. So a lot of that summer and the rest of that school year was basically me playing house. Me and my sister and my brother, we would take care of each other, and I would go and get the groceries with my brother, and we were supposed to have a card to share to go buy those things, but of course I never had it because my stepsister, who was older than me, had it and would hoard it. And so I would pay for a lot of that myself. And for a person with no job, I don't know how I did that, but it was my savings. And I would do a lot of that, and I would take my brother to his driver's ed. I just started doing a lot of that kind of thing, and I remember my breaking point of moving out again, which was crazy, moving out of my stepmom's house, because in between there, my dad passed away. And it was hard for everybody because I was the stepchild, I had no ties to my stepmom anymore, and I think it was hard for her to be around me. So, we found an excuse to fight and ignore each other, I guess. I think I wanted to go spend the night at my friend's house that I hadn't seen in forever. And I saw her at school, but I hadn't hung out with her, and I hadn't hung out with any friends all summer. And I asked to go, and she said no. And I said, well, why not? Because I'm 18 and I've been doing everything, and I have not got to see anybody, and we're not doing anything, so what's up with that? And she basically just didn't want me to go to my friend's house for no reason, other than she thought I was being selfish. I don't know why. She didn't want me to go down to Valley Center, and that's where my friend was, and then that's where my mom was, apparently. And she just didn't want me to go, and I basically said, well, I'm going, so, yeah. And she said, okay, well, if you go, you don't come back. And I said, okay, bye. Yeah, it was a lot. It was fun. I went to my friend's house, and I believe I connected back with my mom, and obviously my boyfriend, and my boyfriend's family at that point was my family, and they said I could live with there if I wanted to, and all these things. But all this stuff happened, and my car that got bought for me by my dad and my stepmom, she took, even though, it was supposed to be mine, which is so nice. So I was carless as well, so I couldn't get a job, without relying on other people. And I believe we reconnected eventually when I got married. Right after I got married, because I invited her to my wedding. She didn't go. And then, like a month after my wedding, she called me crying, saying that, she was sorry, and that, all this stuff that happened was just in the past, and she wasn't in a good spot, and I wasn't in a good spot, and I agree. It was a lot, but we've always had issues too when it comes to those things with stress. That's pretty much my whole story. Talking about my dad dying is harder for me. I would go into detail with that, but it's not fun, He died, I guess I'll tell you just a little bit, but he died right after my stepmom got back from one of her work trips, and I had finally got him to eat something, which was enchiladas that I made him, and he was really liking those, and I remember him smiling. He was so happy. And then she came back from her trip, and the next day, he just started breathing weird. And 5 minutes after he started doing that, he died. And it was crazy. It was one of those things that everybody was, I don't have a better word for it, but ready for, because he was just so miserable, and it was miserable for everybody, including him, and he just wasn't there anymore. Not really. And everybody was ready for it, but you're never ready for it, if that makes sense. And it was just crazy, and it was hard. But one of the things is for me, getting through it is remembering the good things, the good memories, and thinking about how he would feel about my life right now, and all the good things, just all the good stuff, all the things he left us with, all the skills and the lessons and the stories. That's the best way to get through grief, and then your loved ones, I spent a lot of time with my in-laws after that, and my brother, and obviously not my stepmom and things too much, because we were estranged at that point. But I just spent a lot of time doing things that I loved after that, and I still think about it now. Obviously, I still get sad, but it gets better. But there's still some days that are rough, like the day I had my daughter. And my wedding. Those were two very big, rough spots for me, but I just had to remember that he was still with me. If I could, even if I couldn't see him, is what I'm trying to say. So, I am sorry for that depressing video, but that is my story, and I know it was super confusing and probably all over the place. I apologize for that, but I just wanted to get it out here. Just tell my story. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Hope it wasn't too confusing. Bye.